The rise and fall and rise again of humanity across the universe. And also, there are giant intelligent spiders who are rapidly evolving and making their way towards the stars as well. This is Ube, and today we're going to be talking about the book Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Children of Time follows humanity over the course of thousands of years. They flee a war torn and dying Earth in hopes of finding somewhere else to live. So different factions of humans go off in different directions, just hoping to luck upon a planet that seems suitable enough for them to begin terraforming to start a new home for humanity out there in the stars. The book starts with a version of humanity that's pretty familiar to our own. I think it's not too far in our current timeline's future where we need to start fleeing the planet because we can't really live here anymore. And one of the ships that goes out into space finds a planet that's suitable for terraforming and starting a new home for humanity. And their basic plan is to, and it sounds a little crazy, the book explains it a lot better than I probably will, but their plan is to send down a bunch of apes or monkeys to this planet, start terraforming it, but at the same time, they're going to send down this engineered virus that will basically boost their evolution so they'll rapidly evolve, and then eventually they'll get to the point where they will reach back out into humanity via like radio waves, or they'll become spacefaring species themselves and they'll reconnect with humanity later down the line. And I think this is a plan because even if not everyone can survive on the planet and it's like essentially going to be a new batch of humans that are going to be like semi related to the original humans, it's a way for them to feel like humanity survives in some form out there in space. And actually, as I'm talking, I don't think there was really a plan to terraform the planets. I think I'm like reading something else that's talking about terraforming and it's just getting me confused. They essentially found a planet that's suitable enough for life, but the plan doesn't go exactly the way it should. While they're trying to enact the plan, the apes actually don't make it down to the planet, but the virus makes it down. And the virus is supposed to pretty much be compatible with just a certain type of primates, but as luck would have it, it gets down to the planet and it becomes a little bit compatible with a species of spiders. And these spiders begin to rapidly evolve because of the virus. What I think is another cool element of the story is after this happens, it's essentially humanity's last ditch effort to survive out in space, and it fails. And humanity enters essentially like another dark age. So, like, thousands of years go by again, and that batch of humanity, us, essentially dies out due to climate change, due to war, or whatever, one of the many things that's probably going to get us in the end. But thousands of years go by, and we have this new crop of humanity who are now finally getting back into the stars again. And what I think is interesting is while they've been doing this, they've also been unearthing ancient artifacts from the previous civilization, us. And they're kind of fumbling their way through space travel a little bit because they're finding our advanced technology and they're not quite able to decipher it, but they're able to use it well enough to get out into space and follow the trail we left behind. Because once again, they need to flee the planet, and they've heard that the ancient civilization before them left them a utopia out in space, and they're trying to find this planet, which, spoilers a little bit, it's covered in intelligent spiders now. So they go back out into space, and that's where they discover the spider planet. And that was all basically the setup of the book. The narrative, or the bulk of the narrative, is this new batch of humanity going out trying to find one of these planets that was left behind by the previous civilization. And the narrative flips back and forth almost every other chapter. There's some exceptions, but I think every other chapter switches between the human perspective and the spider civilization, and they're both like converging on this one like goal essentially. And humanity's making their way through space over hundreds and hundreds of years. They have cryo sleep. And the spiders are also evolving, and we're just watching both of these two species make their way to a collision of some kind. And the book deals with some super interesting themes. I think evolution and nature versus nurture is a very interesting one. We get a lot of that, especially from the perspective of the spiders and how they're not really understanding how they're evolving so quickly. It's a really interesting perspective in their minds of just like how they're like learning things and using tools and creating stuff. And then we get time and human struggle is another theme in the book because the humans are traveling through space a pretty long way and they're using cryosleep as a way to make it manageable. And a lot of the characters who are the key crew members are constantly put in cryosleep and then woken up 50 years later, 100 years later for like a day or a week to like do some maintenance stuff on the ship and then they go back to sleep. So it's just like a really interesting shock we get from them where like they're just waking up every 50, 100 years and just like it feels like they just like took a nap or slept the whole weekend. And then communication and understanding is another big theme in this book. The story does a great job of like really painting the picture of how vastly different humans and spiders are, obviously. But a big theme in the book is communication because halfway through they're able to sense each other essentially. They're both just shooting radio waves out into space and they're picking them up from like this completely different species, and like the humans are getting some weird spider transmissions and they're just like, I don't know what this means. They're not even sure if it's like intelligent, and the spiders are getting like human transmissions and they're just like, what is this sound? And so I think that really adds to the drama of the conflict of like they both just want to survive and they both could survive together if they could just communicate, but they can't, and so they're just like really scared of each other. So I'm going to get into some spoilers a little bit, just talking about more stuff in the book that's a little more in depth and more specific, like detail specific. So if you haven't read it yet and you want to, I would pop off this video and start reading this 600-page book. It'll fly right by. So overall, I felt that the perspectives between the spiders and the humans were pretty well balanced. There were a couple times throughout the book where like the humans were doing human stuff and I just felt myself wanting to get through the chapter so I could get back to my spider bros and see what they were up to. It just felt a little more compelling the entire time. Not to say the human part was like boring, and there were parts where it was like super exciting and interesting and I wanted to like find out what happened, but a lot of the time I just wanted to get back to the spiders. And then speaking of the humans, two of the characters, Holston and Lane, they kind of have like a relationship. They're two members of the key crew and they're constantly being put into cryo sleep and then being woken up, and then every time they wake up they like they have like a romantic relationship, a physical relationship. And while I think it does speak very well to like the urge for human connection, I can see that if you're being hurled through the blackness of space and you're constantly being put to sleep for 50 years, like when you wake up and see someone you recognize, of course you're going to like gravitate towards them. But I also didn't really understand like why they had such a strong connection. I mean, maybe their like relationship developed a lot off the page, but I feel like it could have like it didn't need a lot, it's not a romance story, but it could have had a little bit more for me to like really buy into why they were so into each other. And then the human storyline kind of deals with like religion and cults a little bit because as time keeps going by, like cryo sections start to fail and some people have to like stay awake and live on the giant like ark or ship that they're like fleeing through space in. And we're still in the perspective of like Holston and Lane, and mostly Holston. He's like our main human POV character. He's being put asleep, being woken up 50, 100 years later, and it gets to like a point where other people on the ship have been awake long enough that they've like had a couple generations of like ship native people like born and raised and died. And I think it's kind of cool that like Holston and Lane and some of the other like key crew who like are only woken up for short bits of time, they've kind of become deified, and like there's a little bit of like mythology and like cults and worship around these key crew, because like the people who were born on the ship know only the ship and outer space, and they like know for some reason these key crew people are really important, not to just the humans but to the ship, and the ship is like their everything. It's their Eden. So of course Holston and Lane would be like these deities. And then talking about the spider storyline a bit, there's also a little bit of a like romance subplot in the spider storyline between Portia. She's our main spider POV, and at some point, one of the males named Fabian, she kind of has this like attachment to him. And even saying romance isn't quite right, because, you know, again, the spiders are so different. They don't really have like romantic love yet. Like, it's still just like mates. And they even have like social, like civil rights issues, like where males are starting to complain that, like, you know, females want to mate with us, and then for some reason they have the right to just kill us. And, you know, that's just the way they've done things forever. And all the females who are in positions of power are just like, that's just how it is. It's how it is, bro. But I do like how Portia, and it's not the same Portia, where in the humans, Holston and Lane are being put to sleep and, you know, woken up. So it's like the same person. In the spider timeline, Portia is like another generation of Portia. Like she's just another spider born. And the way it's almost like the same is because of the virus the spiders inherited from the humans, they're able to pass down knowledge genetically. So, you know, imagine like your parents when you were born, like you have most, if not their, all of their memories and all of their like knowledge. And then when you have kids, they take their knowledge plus your knowledge and then they live a life. So that's why their evolution is just like skyrocketing, is because like all of the knowledge is just passed down. But anyways, this Portia starts to like be kind of confused about why she's so attached to Fabian. But I also think it's funny that like she takes Fabian under her care and she's like, why isn't he happy? He's safe and he can do whatever he wants. But Fabian wants more rights and more freedom, not just for him, but for like other males. And it's kind of like this interesting like friction. And I really loved seeing how the spiders, as they evolved, they started to harness the technology that was available to them, which in the main form of it was ants. They started to harness ant colonies around them. And at first they were just kind of like workhorses, but eventually they were able to control them with more nuance and more specificity. And they start to use the ants almost like supercomputers, like biological living computers, as they start to like build more advanced technology. And it kind of reminded me of that scene in the Three Body Problem books where they're like using like millions of soldiers and like flags to like calculate the trajectory of the suns or something. I don't know. I read those books like 2 years ago, but it was something like that. It made me think of the Three Body Problem and how they just started using like people as a computer. And then the politics and the societal structures of the spiders was super interesting. Just seeing how the different cities and cultures within those cities started to crop up, and they had different like religions and their whole different mythology about, you know, how they came to be. One of the satellites that humanity left behind to like, you know, send down the virus and the monkeys is still orbiting this planet. So they're all like curious what this star is that passes on a regular basis. And so that really plays into like their mythology and religions and why they do a lot of what they do. And it's also mentioned a couple times in the books that there's like on land the spiders are the dominant species, but there's also like a species of like crustaceans or something in one of the oceans that I don't think it's quite as intelligent as the spiders, but the virus seemed to have latched onto them too. And maybe there's two more books in this series. It's a trilogy, and maybe those other books will like do more with the crustaceans, but I was like super interested in like what these crabs were up to. But overall, I really love this book. It is a little bit of a long read. It's like almost 600 pages, I think. And, I said like the human chapters may drag a little bit, but don't let that stop you. It's only a little bit. There's just a couple times. And they don't drag because they're bad. They drag because I want to get back to the spiders and see what they're doing. So I'll definitely check out the other two books. I think I need to read the fifth and final book of the Bobaverse series. So I'll probably talk about that whenever I get around to finishing it. But yeah, let me know if you read Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I think I'm saying his name correctly, but yeah, let me know if you read it, what you think. There's a lot more stuff that happens in the book and a lot more interesting ideas that I didn't really talk about. So I'd like to really see what stuck out for you.